Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. During a Selangor Legislative Assembly session, it was discovered that 3 months ago, the Selangor State Government had degazetted more than half of the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. This despite the widespread public objection during the town hall in September and the State Legislative Assembly's decision in November to abandon degazettement plans for the forest reserve. Now, what does the Selangor State Government hope to achieve with this move? Elizabeth Wong is the Selangor State Assembly person for Bukit Lanjan and chairperson of Selangor Backbenchers Club. She was among the aduns that had written questions on the forest reserve that have prompted this revelation. Good evening, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Why
Hi,
is it
Melissa.
that we only discovered? So why was it that we only discovered about this degazettement now, some 3 months after the excise was approved? Was it intentionally kept quiet from the public?
Hi, Melissa. Hi, Sharaad. Thanks for having me on your show. Just to go straight to your question, I don't think the government purposely decided not to let the public know. I think it's because we should have had a State Assembly sitting in June. So if it had gone on as scheduled, then we would not have to wait until August to have our sitting. So I think if we had known earlier, there could have been a lot of things that we could have done at that time.
Yeah, so this is the material question, right? Considering it was a high visibility around this issue, and it was very much contested, despite not having an assembly sit, shouldn't the government have made public, since it's very convinced that it's in the right on this, shouldn't it make the action public from the very start, from the time they actually degazetted it?
Well, I cannot speak on behalf of the government, but I think from a backbencher's point of view or from an Adun's point of view, it was good that they reported it to the State Assembly. I tell you why. One is that we had a motion last year in November, and the motion clearly stated that we want the government to take measures to conserve, preserve, and to take care of all the forest reserves in Selangor. So it was a very general kind of motion, and it was approved or it was passed unanimously. Even the opposition supported us. So it would be the right move for the Selangor State Government to have reported it, to the State Assembly because we brought up the issue.
Right, but Elizabeth, on that particular motion from Kota Anggrek Adun, Najwan Halimi, Loy Sien, who is the state exco in charge of these matters, said that this motion was not binding on the state exco. I mean, there are 43,000 objections, 130,000 signatures on a petition, all these others in the assembly, and numerous experts. And the state exco says none of this is binding on them. So what is binding on the state exco? What exactly do they hope to achieve?
That's a very good question. But it's like this. I'm not talking about the signatures or the petitions. I'm talking about the motion in the State Assembly. Unfortunately, what Loy Sien said, the state exco, said is correct, which is any motion, State Assembly motion by a private member, i.e. Adun, it is an expression. If we approve that, that would be seen as an expression of the House. But it is not legally binding. It does not bind the executive on what positions to take. But I want to add on this thing. Although I was very upset when we heard that on Monday, to the point that I think a lot of us leapt to our feet to protest. But at the same time, we were also quite surprised. I was very surprised that they had not degazetted what they intended to much earlier, i.e. they reduced close to 50% a little bit less than that. And I think that has got to do with the fact that there was a motion in the House, and at the same time, all the protests that went on for the last 1 year.
Elizabeth, I understand that in all states, perhaps except the territory of Sabah, that state excos have sole authority over forest reserves. I'm wondering whether there's any chance that this decision might be reversed. Is this set in stone?
Well, I actually ruminated on this fact for the last 48 hours. And this is my opinion. I think it's a little too late because if we had known much earlier, for example, if we had the State Assembly sitting in June, I think certain things could have been done much earlier on. But if we're talking about 3 months down the line, most likely the title would have been issued. I think, right now we are caught in a bind where it's already a decision made a very long time ago. Some of the,
but Elizabeth, can I ask you this?
Different processes.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I understand that. But this is cold comfort to the Temuan community, to environmentalists. In fact, for us who live in the state of Selangor, who have to breathe the air that's going to be polluted as a consequence of this real estate development. The question really is, was there good faith on the part of the Selangor...
Sorry, go on.
Was there good faith on the part of the Selangor state government when it did this matter? Did it, in fact, from day one, intend to have the degazettement? The halving of the area is cold comfort, is a spin that the Selangor state government is now putting on this story. But is it of any consequence for all those matters that concern us, environmental, community, cultural issues that are involved in this particular scandal?
Well, to be frank, late last year, when I had a discussion with them, I think there was sometime right after the public hearing, which was end of September, I did speak to the Menteri Besar. I spoke to Kiloi Sian, and I said that this should not go ahead. And they told me at that point in time that they were trying their best not to do so, not to proceed with the degazettement. So, that was last year. So then we also heard that, for example, the company which intended at the beginning wanted that piece of land decided to not go ahead. But between that time and May, something must have happened. I'm not sure what it is because I have not been able to meet up with Kiloi Sian or the Menteri Besar since Monday. So, there's a lot of things that we actually have to sit down with them. The Arjuns want a proper briefing, a detailed briefing about what actually went on, what is going to happen, and where do we fit into the whole, this whole saga.
Right. Okay. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much. We will continue reaching out to the Selangor State Exco to find out their side of to get more clarity. But thank you for being on the show and sharing your perspective on this.
Yeah,
that was Elizabeth Wong, the Selangor State Assembly person for Bukit Lanjut. We're going to take a quick break, but we will be back with more. Stay tuned to consider this.
Membeli kereta terpakai kini mudah sekali.
Amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat menjadi kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta. Berteraskan adab yang terpahat di jiwa dan raga. Marilah bersama kita membina negara Malaysia. Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara rakyat didengari.
Kenapa?
Membawakan apa yang penting di mana sahaja anda berada.
Kerana kita hendak putuskan rantaian jangkitan.
Belanjawan dan pendekatan berterima kasih.
Hello, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. June Tan is a member of the Coalition for the Defence of Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. She joins us now. June, good evening. Thank you for being on the show. The Selangor State Government says that they're keeping about 46% of the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve, forest area as forest reserve. So they're only excising, they say, only half, slightly more than half. Do you consider this a concession or a compromise by the Selangor State Government?
Hi, good evening, Melissa, Sharaad. Thanks for having me. No, I don't think it's a compromise at all. I feel it's a very unwise decision because I don't believe any area within an 8,000-year-old peat swamp forest, the last remaining kind in southern Selangor, ought to be disturbed or to be developed. And taking into so many different factors, this is a very unique ecosystem. Peatlands are one of the world's most important terrestrial ecosystems. They hold a lot of moisture. They've got a lot of carbon, so they sequester a lot of carbon. The idea of actually going into this area and developing it would mean releasing all this carbon. And it's estimated in that area, the figure that was given, is you're going to release about 3 million tons of carbon dioxide into the environment. Which, like to give you a sense, according to the EPA, your average passenger car per year gives out 4 metric tons of carbon dioxide. So we're looking at suddenly like a lot of cars being and carbon dioxide being released in the environment. And that comes really strange. After 3 weeks, we had the 6th assessment report from IPCC, from the UN Authority on Climate Change, who basically said that, it's code red for humanity. We are just looking at a couple of decades before we reach a tipping point, and our climate would have been, the changes that happen would be irreversible. So we don't know what's going to be in store for us. So this idea of cutting down...
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but surely all these arguments are academic at this point in time. We just heard from a state assemblyman from Selangor who says that the chances are the title deed has been changed and there's no going back on this decision. So whatever 500 football fields worth of a pristine forest are going to be bulldozed in the interest of real estate development. What happens now from your point of view, from the coalition's point of view?
We're going to keep fighting it, I think. We're going to keep trying to get them to reverse it if we can. There are different means that we would try and consider. One is a legal mean. The whole process has been shrouded in secrecy, I would say. There's been a lack of transparency. The idea that they made the decision in April and only announced it in August, even though we had repeatedly asked for the report from Perkhidmatan, from Perhutanan, but we didn't. We wrote in and we were rejected. So the idea is like, what is going on? What is your justification? So it appears to us that there is no clear justification or no clear rationale to do this. So actually, the whole process lacks of collaborative and open public consultation. So actually, we are demanding answers really from the state government.
Well, okay, so the state government has given some broad responses as to as to the rationale behind why they've decided to take this move to excise slightly more than half of the forest reserve. They said that they had done a consultancy that was appointed, has said that there's almost no difference or very little difference between the excised area to the replacement forest area. They said they had put conditions on the developer. They had done multiple things to I guess, rationalize their decision. You've read through these points. What do you make of them? Do they hold water?
We know them as points only. That's the trouble, Melissa. We haven't seen any of the reports. So I'm not an expert in hydrology or, the peat ecosystem, but we're very clear, like they haven't heard outside from our experts who have protested, who have been very clear that this is not a right decision. So we have heard from them. So we want to see on the other side, if your expert says this is working out, we want to know why. And we actually want to invite a discussion about this. But at this point, none of us have seen the report.
June, do you think, and you say you struggle to understand the rationale, but isn't money and profit a very simple explanation behind this decision? Somebody is going to make a lot of money from this.
Well, it's obviously not the right yet, And I think that's the idea that we're looking at, because this property development, firstly, there's an overhang in Selangor. I think we all clearly can see that there is a glut in property development. And so if you are going to make money from this, why are you taking away a national treasure, a national asset that belongs actually to the people of Selangor? And they have repeatedly said they don't want this. I think you mentioned in the objections that was raised. So, yeah.
So can I just ask you, June, based on the discussion and the work that you've had with coalition members, do you think that the Selangor state government will be punished for this, or can be punished for this? Could this be received poorly by voters and remembered by the next polls, or is this one of the many things that come and go, and 5-minute memory, we move on to the next thing, and then perhaps the state government thinks they can get away with it?
No, I don't think so, because I think the timing for them is really unfortunate. We are coming at the time where, countries are already declaring climate emergency. So the situation feels very dire. So for them to pull it off now, people who are very literate already about climate issues, we've been so heartened by the response, because people are angry, not just on Twitter, but people who would write in. And everyone that I spoke to, no matter which field they come from. And, I'm from the arts, actually. So the idea is not just, even though I may have sounded academic earlier, it's not just about the books anymore. It's something that affects us. And to be honest, we've seen this happen so much during the lockdown. What had happened to Tasik Chini, what's happening to Pahang, all the deforestation there. Like, do we really want to stand by and see another deforestation? So I think the riot are very angry, to be honest. So I think it would hurt the current government a lot.
All right, June, thank you so much for being on the show. That was June Tan of the Coalition for the Defence of Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this, but we will be back with more, so stay tuned.
Banyak yang boleh anda pelajari di Astro AWANI link, and the best thing, it's all free. Pertama, kita ada webinar where we focus on the bigger picture, featuring the experts of experts helping your future planning and
Amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat
menjadi kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta.
Hello, thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. But if you've just joined us on the show, tonight we're discussing the Selangor State Government's move to degazette more than half of the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. Joining us now is Wong Pui Yi, investigative researcher at the Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, or better known as the C4 Centre. Pui Yi, welcome to the show. What are C4's concerns regarding the due process of the degazettement of the Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve? Was there anything irregular in the exercise to you?
If we are comparing with other states in Malaysia, no, there's nothing irregular. Selangor is the first state that conducts public inquiries into before degazetting forests, so that's good. However, the way that the public inquiry, the town hall took place. So, okay, the due process, there are several dodgy elements. First was the public inquiry. The public was given 30 days to submit objections, firstly, after an announcement by the Forestry Department. So within 30 days, we had to do our research, we had to know what's happening, and then there was a need to have a public campaign to gather objections. And the civil society managed to gather more than 45,000 written objections. Okay, so that was fine. That was submitted within the time frame. And then a town hall was called. It was announced one day before the date of the town hall. I think, 30-40 minutes away from the area which will be degazetted. And at the beginning, there was this of the town hall session, there was a whole commotion about who is allowed to go in and who's not allowed to go in. If you're sincere about getting public feedback, why all these restrictions, why all these dodgy dealings, why not be open and transparent? Okay, so that's the first one. The whole process of getting public feedback was dodgy. Secondly, there has been no feasibility study made public, no development plan, what's going to happen to the land. No environmental impact assessment, but that's fine because you can't do an EIA if you don't know what's going to happen to the land. But if you haven't had a plan for the land, how can you justify degazetting the forest to build something that you don't know yet, right? Okay, so that's there's no plan. Yeah.
Pui, can you help us understand what the state government gets from such a deal? What pressure could there have been on the state government to go against public objection, the objections of many experts, the objection of the assembly, even though, in more general terms, that motion by Kota Anggrek Adun? Why? Is it something compelling like money? I mean, what else is there in this deal?
We don't have the facts. Why don't we have the facts? Because the government hasn't been transparent. And why aren't they transparent? They have to answer that. And we as the members of the public have to demand that. But of course we can speculate. And they can't blame us for speculating. Coincidentally, I just had a very long discussion with an Adun, a Selangor Adun today, and he was very open. When you're in a position of power, there will be temptations. You just need to speak to any local councillor. Local councillor is the lowest of the low of so-called wakil rakyat. All of them get enticed by bribes here and there. And there's so many areas, there's so many risk factors in giving licenses, in approving permits, in giving out contracts.
Right.
So,
Pui Yi, I know that the C4 Centre looks at environment-related corruption in Malaysia. And I'm just wondering, based on your research, what patterns do you see in the nexus of corruption and the environment?
The pattern actually occurs across industries. And definitely all human activity will impact the environment. So it goes from extractive industries, mining, logging, to manufacturing industries, heavy industries, approval of licenses, whether a heavy industry should be situated next to a kampung. and to property development, which affects all of us urbanites very much. And property development on a hill would affect the environment. My core area of research is in trade, the waste trade, trading of waste materials. If there is corruption in for example, enforcement agencies, then the waste materials can come into the country easily. And if there is corruption among monitoring agencies, then the waste will be dumped easily too. So corruption is a disease that permeates every level of our society. It's not just politicians, it's not just public civil servants, it's also the people who pay the bribes, which is any one of us, honestly. So we really need to,
Pui, we were told earlier by a state assembly person that this deal is probably going to go ahead. Reversal is unlikely. Do you see any possibility if, say, for instance, a corruption or some, illegal exchange happened that could derail such a deal? Or in Malaysia, does corruption count as a factor in negating a contract, for instance, between state government and developers?
Legally, I cannot answer that because I don't have a legal background, but I am sure because corruption, if found to be corrupt, if found that there was money money exchanging hands, it's a crime. So I think that if you go into a contract with a criminal, a proven criminal, I think action can be taken. But whether we can prove the corruption or not, it's very, very difficult.
Yes, that's true. Thank you so much, Pui, for joining us on the show. Oh, you have some more?
Yeah.
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. Since catching corruption is so difficult, we really need to institute mechanisms, law reforms, to catch corruption before it happens. We need to check on power. We need to check on this close connection between businesses and politicians in our country. And we really need an empowered public to demand for that political will to make these changes. Yeah, please go to C4 website to see what type of changes we need to make.
Thank you so much, Pui, for joining us on the show. That was Wong Pui Yi from the Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, better known as C4 Centre, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. But before we leave you tonight, a reminder that you can get the latest COVID-19 information on vaccines at astro.awani.com, as well as the Astro AWANI app. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.